Hello, interwebs, and welcome to the Frak This podcast. I am your waterlogged host, Jesse Gender, and I am joined, as always, by...
It's Vera! So what you're saying is you're wet.
Oh, I am always wet for this podcast.
Good to know.
Take that however way you intend it.
I will.
How are you doing, Vera? Are you also soggy today?
More damp, a little moist.
Damp? Yeah, moist. Good moist.
Well, I've started getting, so it's my birthday this month. So I've started getting stuff sent to the P.O. box and or off of wish lists. And I have several different wish lists that, because I will provide different ones to different audiences, depending on what of my stuff you take in. And so, stuff has started coming in.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Whether it be, I've gotten a couple of dresses. I've gotten a fair amount of underwear. I have gotten.
I mean, you know.
I have gotten sent candy. What
kind of candy?
Well, a couple of things. I've got Cadbury eggs.
Oh, full of cream.
Yep, just how I like to be. I mean how I like my eggs. That's what I meant. And
I don't think that makes it better.
Black currant flavored police box, like Doctor Who little things.
Oh, I was gonna say, are we gonna have to say ACAB to the candy?
No, I haven't tried these.
All candies are bastards.
So I've gotten that, and I got sent what I can only think to describe as like a cow print bikini maid outfit.
Huh. Interesting.
That and one monster dick. So
I love it. Amazing.
Doing pretty well so far.
That sounds like a good birthday, you know?
Yeah, it's not. It's we've still got at time of recording, a little under 2 weeks. There's time for more stuff to come in.
Yeah, more monster dicks.
Yeah.
Send her more monster dicks, everyone. If you haven't sent her a monster dick by the time you hear this, I'm going to be disappointed in you.
I need to assess my toy collection again, because I haven't properly taken inventory in a while. And I know it's gotten a lot bigger because I'm now several years into having a couple of different companies send me stuff to try out and review.
I see you get those from time to time, and I'm like, yeah, you must get a lot. I only ever got one sex toy from doing this. It was literally one time I got one sex toy. It's a great one. I still use it, but it's only one. I'm kind of sad about it.
I have gotten a lot. I've gotten a lot of vibrating things and a lot of thick shafted things. And
they know their audience, you know.
Yeah,
they know your audience, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and one sex doll.
I did see that one. I did watch that one. That was fun.
Brittany.
Oh wow.
Dear. This is my life somehow.
I was say this is a Battlestar Galactica podcast, so I hope you're all enjoying that. That wasn't even my attempt at transition. It's just sort of like what show is this?
Yeah, what are we actually doing? Like
I don't know.
I feel like this is gonna be the episode with the big drop off of listeners as they realize, because like I will bet you there were people who like were stopping the podcast like when we started to do our outro and like talk about our stuff and elsewhere you find me, who didn't hear me talk about the fact that I have an OnlyFans and I have all this other stuff, and who didn't realize, and now I'm just talking about monster dicks, and all of a sudden they're going, wait a minute.
I mean, if they're sci-fi fans, if they're any type of sci-fi fan, hell, if they're a Star Trek fan like me, they should know that talking about aliens or monsters' genitals just comes with the territory.
I've got good variety, including a tentacle, so you know.
Gene Roddenberry would want this way.
I know.
Right?
We're making Gene proud up in here.
Speaking of Gene Roddenberry, though, Battlestar Galactica is written and created by Ronald D. Moore, who worked on Star Trek The Next Generation, which brings us to today's episode, another soggy titled episode. not another. It's a first one that they've done, but related to what I said earlier. Anyways, this episode is titled Water.
Just keep explaining it. Just keep explaining it forever. It'll be fine.
Just keep going. Well, you see, water is made up of H2O. Thereby, the building blocks of the universe are atoms, as Carl Sagan once said. I don't know. I'm going to stop there.
It's made up of H2O, and I know I like a good O every now and then. And
I do like a good O every then. And speaking of which, let's actually talk about this show. I'm done. We're getting into our recap of this episode, Water, the second full episode of Battlestar Galactica. Let us get into our recap. We start off with Boomer, sort of waking up, becoming aware in a kind of closet. She is covered in water, and she's very clearly unsure why she's there. And she looks into her bag that is with her, and there is clearly a bomb in there, a C4 detonator. So this surprises and shocks her.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to say something now that is going to be the recurrent thing across this episode. The fuck is going on? So here's the thing. We kind of talked about this last time. That the previous episode opened with a situation that also made you go, what the fuck is going on? But also addressed it, not only pretty quickly, but at the very least within the episode. I have so many fundamental questions, and unless I miss something, which it's me, I might have, this is playing a little more fast and loose with withholding information. I'm sure this makes total sense for someone who has seen the whole series. For me, I have so many goddamn questions.
Interesting, because okay, so for me, I think this is actually the first episode I ever watched of the show. For some reason, I thought it was what I think is the next episode of this show, but I actually think this was it, because I very vividly remember this opening scene and also being confused about the water stuff. I'm like, did I miss something? Like, what am I supposed to know about? Like, I was trying to figure out how much I was supposed to know about her, and I was able to, pick it up from context clues. So I'm curious what your confusion is.
I mean, I'll lead into this right now. It's not about what she did. I get logistically the things that occurred. I understand that. What I am left asking 5 million questions about is to what extent is she aware, and to what extent does she have control, and when and how does that get taken away from her? That's the shit that I'm going, what the fuck is going on? Like,
okay,
the logistics.
Okay. I see what you're confused. Okay, got it.
I follow the logistics. That's not where I'm confused. It's trying to figure out what the fuck, how this works with this sleeper agents shit. That's where I'm getting really thrown off.
Got you. Okay, that is a good confusion to have, because I thought you meant you were confused about the logistics of what was even happening in the episode.
No. I got that.
Okay.
I got that part. It's her.
Then that confusion is intentional.
Yeah,
good. You're having the intentional
behavior and trying to figure out why she is doing what she's doing and why she isn't doing other stuff.
Okay.
That is, yeah.
Okay. Then that confusion, that line is an intentional thing that the episode is setting up. Yes.
I'm sure it is. It did kind of push it to the point of frustration for me, though.
Fair.
Because she is so central. I think if her stuff, because she's basically in both plots. She's in the A plot and the B plot, in some form.
Yes, a different version of Boomer.
Yes, some form of this person is in both the A and B plot. So I can't stop thinking about her, which means the fact that she doesn't make sense becomes a distraction after a while. I think it might have not bothered me so much. I'm getting into this before we've got 5 seconds into this thing. But I think it probably would have flowed better for me if she had been only a B plot. And so it was going back to her, I'm I still don't know what your deal is. But there was something else going on where I felt on firmer ground. I tend to get, unless confusion is the pitch of the whole show, like it was with the first season of Lost, unless that is the fundamental thing that I know I'm in for, I by the time an episode is over, I want to have a better understanding of what I saw than I had by the time this was done.
I will say this show, it has a few mystery boxes, like obviously who are the other Cylons, where is Earth, what is Earth, that sort of stuff. But in terms of the like moment to moment plot, that is not going to be the predominant writing narrative. I think again, I may be misremembering, but I remember it being much more clear in what it's trying to do with a lot of its plots going forward.
Okay.
So. Yeah. Now, obviously, that being said, there are some big mystery boxes that we will get.
Well, yeah, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how they handle that. For folks not aware of my YouTube work, as a longtime Doctor Who fan, boy, am I sick of mystery box storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, am I so damn sick of it. That having been said, it is not a universally bad thing. And I am in particular sick of the way Doctor Who in specific does it. Because I think Doctor Who does it badly most of the time.
I'm going to be very curious on your and my rewatching of this, because I remember, all I'll say is I'm a big defender of where this show goes. However, it has been a very long time since I've watched it, so we will see if my opinion changes. Because my opinion changed a little bit on, like, Babylon 5 as we watched it. So like this like not complete like fundamentally, but like decent, like the nuances of it shifted. So we'll see if that happens here. So anyways, that's a long way off. We got several seasons before we get to shit like that. But we will get there. We start with so Boomer signs a bomb in a bag, clearly doesn't know how she got there. She leaves the room. She runs into Callie, who informs her that it's morning. She didn't realize that it's morning, so clearly she's got lost time. She goes into small arms, like basically where they keep the like sort of arms on the ship. She goes in there by them herself. She finds where this C4 detonator came from, opens it up, and finds that there are a bunch more C4 detonators gone. I believe there were 6 missing in total.
Yeah.
And the show cuts to show us where they are. They're in the water tank. So we know where they are by the end of this little scene, even though she doesn't.
Yes. So, like, just to narrow down from my broader sort of, I don't know what the hell's going on, just to, like, solidify it as an example. Okay, so she lost time.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, so that would seem to imply that when going into executing sleeper mode orders or something, like, she just isn't aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, she seems to know right off, this bomb that I found in my own bag, I shouldn't report this to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I should hide this, which is there will be, I would say it's going to be slightly more justified a little later on when she gets nervous when she realizes how many detonators are missing. But I'm sorry, if you're on a ship and you find a bomb in your own bag, and if you don't think that you put it there, the level of secrecy is not enough that it would track that she knows what she is, but it's a little more than I would expect from like somebody in that position just finding a bomb in their bag.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to it. Well, I'll explain. I have an explanation that I think this episode kind of gives, but I'll wait until a later scene because I do think that there is. Well, let me put it this way. I'll get to my justification later for it, but I do think that the way this episode is trying to lean on is that while she is not aware when she's a sleeper agent, when she is, for lack of a better word, in her civilian mode, I guess, even though she's in the military, like her non-sleeper agent mode, whatever you want to call it, she is still influenced by some underlying programming. So, like, my assumption would be that, like, the underlying programming would have her be like, you do not tell people about this. Like, whatever the sleeper agent had her come to at that moment, it would be like, we don't want her to know about this, so we're going to kind of influence her not to do those things. So while my instinct would be like, she's not fully sleeper mode, she's got 2 sort of conscious awarenesses when she's not in sleeper mode, but she does have some residual programming is kind of what I would think about it.
That makes a certain amount of sense. We'll see how it pans out. Like, here's the thing that I'm going to be watching for. Like, I could mostly buy that, I think, at this point. Where it's already kind of skirting up to the line is, like, she seems so autonomous that, like, she seems to be noticing at times the underlying, like that something is influencing her, or at least coming really close to noticing that. And if she has the ability to notice that she's being influenced, that's again, that just strikes me as a fraught way to do it and not have the entire narrative fall apart later on.
Well, let's get to, because there'll be a scene later on that I think will be a little bit juicier for some of the specifics of how this works. So we'll get there when we get there. But I'll save that discussion for later on. So we then cut to back from the opening credits, which again we see little glimpses of the episode here. Oh, also I didn't mention at the top of the episode. Did you stick around for the new the opening crawl thing with the text and everything?
I did, which seems to confirm memetically that sleeper agents are in fact a real thing. So again, that is the thing that stretches most the notion that Head 6 is only in Gaius's head, because again, that's the biggest leap he would have had to have made for him to come up with that idea on his own.
Did he come up with that idea?
No, but I'm saying that if Head 6 is just in his head, that means it's his idea.
Gotcha.
And the show, because of the intro, that is only for the audience, and is telling the audience some of them think they're human, it's confirming that's real. And so he knew something that I feel like is still, it's stretching the notion of whether there was any way that it's reasonable for him to have come to that conclusion, especially considering some stuff that I'm going to be saying about him later on.
Okay, we'll get there. It's so interesting hearing you try to work this out. I'm fascinated. Anyway,
I'll say now, my suspicion is that they are going to pull she is just in his head. That is where I am expecting this to go. But whichever way they go, I'm having a lot of fun watching them walk the tightrope of trying to not confirm either way.
I won't say shit, but it is. I am just this is. I'm gonna put it this way. This is kind of one of those shows where I have to try to not be too smug and be like, I know it's coming, because you can definitely do that with this and be like, he. But I do know that I and a certain segment of the audience that have watched the show are probably giggling a little bit at some of the things you say.
Okay.
And anyways. Cut back from the opening credits. Ty is looking for his sash because Colonial 1 is set to arrive in 30 minutes, as we hear on the announcements, and he is needed for the honor detail. And he's looking at his alcohol at one point, and he takes the bottle and he marks out 5 sort of lines on it, presumably 5 different number of drinks that he can still have with the.
Well, he actually measures it because it's a finger of alcohol. That's an actual measurement in a bottle. So
as I learned when I worked at Starbucks, because someone came up to Starbucks when I worked there and they said, "Can I get a finger of milk or whatever in it?" I'm like, "A what?" It's like a finger of milk, and I'm like, "I don't." A what? And I had to get it explained to me what a finger was. So yes, I do know it as a measure, but I was so confused. I thought he wanted me to put up my finger in the milk. It was very weird. It's like, this is a weird fetish. You want to?
Is this what you want? Is you offer this milk with your finger?
Is this good? I'm like, my finger's burning. Is this what you wanted, sir? You getting off from this? Anyways. It was a very weird Starbucks. Anywho, but yes, he measures out 5 different fingers of it because he can only there's only so much alcohol left.
There's that. I actually was partially wondering how much of that was him trying to save it and how much of that was him trying to keep better track of when he is drinking. Because if he's a habitual drinker, then it's very easy if he stops being vigilant to just not... I'm not going to say not realized he took a drink, but to not be properly cataloging how often that's happening if it's just part of his standard routine.
Interesting. Yeah, I could definitely see that read on it. My read was more just I only have so much of this left, so I've got to meter it out more, and him sort of being like, I got to be kind of... It could be a little A, a little a B, to be frank.
I mean, yeah, I feel like keeping track of his own drinking... needs to be part of it because he did have that thing in the miniseries where he did try to throw it away, which to me says he has he has a desire to not be doing this, but he also can't stop. And so he's like trying to find ways to mitigate, to slow down, and or to keep on top of what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it also probably is being helped by the fact that like he can't get much more of it.
Yeah.
At least, So at
like,
least as of right now, I'm sure someone's gonna make a still, but I actually don't remember. I legitimately don't even remember if that's a plot point or not.
There's got to be moonshine on this shit, baby.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it probably is a plot point at some point. I legitimately don't remember, but so we'll see. Anyways, we then cut to Lee having a trauma flashback of him blowing up the Olympic carrier.
Which, I'm fine with the way they did it was a little much, though. Because, all right, I understand that they're rooting this in the idea of he can't look at himself in the mirror right now. I get that. But it's a little much to have him open his locker, see that the mirror's there, and go, ah!
Which is an awful person.
Which is what he does. It's a little much.
It is a little much. I do want to call out.
I support the notion of like he's traumatized by what he did. What he did was a heavy thing. That's cool. It's just that beat. I'm like, dial it back a tad.
I do want to call out. I want to try and start, since we're posting these podcasts on YouTube now. I want to try and point out some more comments that we get from the podcast. So just to bring this up here, RM Loner, apologies if I said your name wrong, commented on the episode 33, our last podcast, saying Ron Moore wanted to show people inside the Olympic carrier, but the Sci-Fi Channel execs refused to let him do it, having been wary from the start about the show's tone being so bleak that no one would want to watch it. They even made him change the theme song to something less depressing, though he was able to replace it with the preferred version in season 2, and depending on where you're watching it, you can now even get it on this season for season 1. But just, to point out, I know that we had a conversation last episode with Dr. Aaron about like, they look in and they can't see anybody on the Olympic carrier. Ron Moore wanted the intention to be that there were people there.
I'm glad he was overruled, to be honest. I understand the desire to do that, to really put the characters through the ringer. But first of all, not only do I agree that's kind of too depressing, but I also think it's way more interesting to have. I mean, this is kind of what I said they chickened out on during the miniseries. It's way more interesting to have them grapple with never knowing if they were right or not, than and never knowing if there were even people on there. And they could go, well, we didn't see anybody. Yeah, but that doesn't, you still don't know. Grappling with that uncertainty, I find way more interesting than them being certain what happened, especially because one is going to cause them to question and have to really find a firm footing within themselves. And the other one's just going to make everybody fucking depressed. Which is way less interesting. Making your characters depressed is not the most interesting in the world. Making them conflicted, that's interesting.
Well, speaking to your note here, we do have Lee then going to talk to his dad, Adama, and sort of saying should I be thinking more about this? I shouldn't we as leaders take responsibility for our actions and be learning to second guess or question our decisions? Don't we have to take responsibility as leaders to question our actions, he says. And then Adama's response to this says, a man takes responsibility for his actions, right or wrong, and accepts the consequences and lives with them every day. So sort of saying you can't really question whether you were right or wrong. You just, live with it and you go forward.
Yeah.
I mean, mindset.
And he's clearly been living this philosophy for so long that it's kind of second nature to him. But to a certain degree, he's right insofar as once you've made the decision, you do have to just live with it. And so cause Lee is kind of doing that thing that I think is a little bit more the purview of youth, which is to grapple with that idea of but what if I made a different choice? What if I went back and did it different? Yeah, but you can't. So his father is kind of coming at it from the perspective of, second guessing doesn't help because you already made the decision, and whatever it was, whether you were right or not, you just got to deal with that.
Yep.
Because second guessing only helps before you make the decision. Once you've made it, sorry, bud, that's kind of it.
Well, there's a counterbalance to this notion later on in the episode that I'll reserve my discussion points for that. But yes, I agree.
We do get another perspective on this, although I don't think they're necessarily.
They're not opposing.
Yeah, they're not contradictory. You can do both. Yes.
But yeah, we'll talk about when we get there. But I'll leave my more discussion up for that point. But I agree. I don't think they're necessarily contradictory. We then cut to Colonial 1 arriving on the Galactica. We had a scene with Billy, Laura Roslin's assistant, and Laura Roslin herself. And she's sort of like being like, do I have to go through this every time that I step on the ship? And Billy's like, well, it's protocol. And she says, well, let Adama sound the trumpets. It'll make him more comfortable and easier to deal with. And Billy says, well, that's smart. And she says, it's not smart, it's politics. And then she also says, I think I might tire of this outfit. I only have 3 for the rest of my life. And she says, and Billy says, oh, you look fine. And then she says, Billy, you don't know anything about women, do you? Let's go be presidential.
I'm liking the small ways that the show is finding to point things out that I might not think of otherwise. Like, yeah, I only have 3 outfits for the rest of my life because that's all I had on the trip I was taking when all this happened. I was like, oh, dang. I hadn't thought about that. And like, part of it is you don't think about it with TV shows because a lot of TV shows, I feel like especially sci-fi shows, for all intents and purposes, characters have 1-2 costumes the entire run of the show anyways. But like bringing a highlight to it and really noting like, yeah, you have 3 things from now until you die, most likely.
And it's kind of a recurring thing throughout this whole episode. I mean, we'll bring it up later, but like Baltar makes note of the fact that there's only a few of these like kind of Capricorn cigarettes that he has come up, like the fact that we were talking about earlier with the drinking, the alcohol. So there's like the limited resources and the limited ability to get these things are all like rare now, which is kind of interesting. So, and then I do also, well, we'll get to it more earlier, but like her just not liking the sort of military pomp and circumstance of all of this and being like, oh God, do I have to really deal with this? We then cut to Laura speaking to the bridge crew of the Galactica, sort of giving the sort of rah, I'm proud to serve as your president speech to all of them, sort of like kind of what you'd expect a politician to be like, yes, I see you and I appreciate you sort of thing. And then we learn that the Vergon Express is standing by basically to unrep is the word they use. And as we'll learn, they're basically hooking up to get water from the Galactica. We also have during this section, we cross-cut a little bit here, where Boomer goes and talks to Chief Tyrrell, and she kind of makes it sound like, oh, I just want to go have sex in the closet. She's clearly distraught and worried, but she's kind of making it seem that way. And Callie, it should be noted, kind of she's the deckhand, shakes her head as she kind of knows that they have a relationship. So they're not hiding it very well. So, as a note.
I mean, like, they're really not.
They're not. Yeah.
They both kind of suck at keeping secrets, to be completely honest, which, given that one of them is a spy, is kind of funny.
Well, that might be part of the play, right? It's like if I look like I'm bad at hiding a secret like this, no one will suspect me of hiding a deeper secret, sort of thing.
I suppose.
Anyways, we do have the Vergon Express docking with the Galactica, and we sort of get a little bit of explanation of like, the Galactica has enough water to be stocked up for years without replenishing, but certain ships will need to tank off with the Galactica periodically to get water. During this, we have Boomer talking to Chief in the closet, and she tells him about the 6 missing C4 detonators. He basically goes, you need to tell the Masters at Arms now. And she says, well, I think they'll think that I'm the one who took them. She tells him basically the entire story. And Tyrrell is basically trying to justify it with her. He says, it's not your fault. Someone is setting you up. You must have been drugged or manipulated. So he's kind of like, he's also kind of in denial about some clear evidence to the contrary.
I mean, extremely. Actually, I would go so far as to say, boy, this guy just ignores all the red flags by the time this episode's done.
If you're wearing rose-tinted glasses, every red flag just looks like flags.
Yeah. But like, this was kind of what I was talking about, where like, I get her anxiety and wanting to hide this, realizing there were that many missing. This part I get. This part makes sense to me in that kind of panic. People are already looking for Cylons. You know, if all this stuff is missing and if they can tie it to me, that's just, I'm screwed. Like, I get this panic choice a little bit more than finding a bomb and basically just deciding, well, I'll just return the detonator and everything will be fine. Huh?
I can still buy that decision earlier, basically, and like you're disoriented, it's weird, you can be like, I don't want to deal with this, and yeah, and again, the underlying programming aspect that I'm arguing.
Yeah, I don't want to say that I don't buy it at all, but I will say it's one of the things
this is more justified
that contributed to my confusion.
Yes. Well, we cut to Ty and Adama talking to each other while the president's still on the ship. And, you know, Ty sort of joking, he's like, feels like I'm being a tour. Adama says, "It feels like I'm being a tour guide." And Ty's like, "Yeah, she must think this is one big educational experience, having been a teacher, essentially." But then we also get cut away to the president talking to Lee. And she says, "Oh, he must see me as an idiot." But then Lee points out, well, he said this entire ceremony was his idea. He hates protocol and pomp and circumstance. He's making a gesture. He wants to make you feel like you're the president. Which then she sort of like looks at Adama and sort of reassesses him. So, which I like. I like that. Like, I like the idea that we get a sort of scene here with both Ty and Adama and President and Lee sort of like showcasing how they have presumptions about the other person of who they actually are rather than actually knowing them, which I think is kind of interesting.
I mean, I'll just tip my hand right now. The stuff with Roslin and Adama is really good because, again, given the initial setup, you would expect these two just to be butting heads the whole time. So instead, setting them up to get to better understand each other, knowing that inevitably they are going to butt heads later on, but having them start to build a relationship and start to realize that they have means to connect with and understand the other before that happens has the potential to make it a hell of a lot more interesting.
Some spicy drama, as they say. We then cut to spicy. We then cut to Billy and Billy going to hit on D, which I just realized it's Billy D. Haha. Anyways, that's their ship name. I'm just gonna call him Billy D. But anyways, Billy goes to try to hit on D, and says, "You look really good. I really like your hair." And she's like, "My hair?" And clearly she finds it kind of cute that he says that, but in a, like, you don't know what you're doing kind of way. And he even says to himself under his breath, "I really don't know anything about women." So,
clearly.
It is adorable. He's an adorable, inept guy. And it's kind of cute.
It's kind of cute, I guess.
I think it's kind of cute. But I don't know, if it's the end of the world and I have a guy hitting on me and he's kind of being adorable about it, I'd be fine.
It's funny. Like, most romance aspects in shows just kind of bounce off me. You'd think I was like aromantic to the point of being like repulsed by it, and I'm not. It's just this shit bounces right off me so often.
I know. I mean, this sort of stuff doesn't bother. I mean, it was the stuff like Babylon 5 where it was like so hardcore leading into like, look, they're gonna end up together. Look how hot she is. Like, it's like, this is kind of cute in a way that like lets them both be human, and I kind of like that.
This doesn't bother me. Like, there's a reason I said bounced off me as opposed to annoys me. Like, this doesn't bother me. I'm not mad. I just don't care.
Why do you hate heterosexuals, Vera, huh?
They know what they did.
Yes, they do. Anyways, while the ship is connecting to the Galactica, we have all of those C4 bombs go off, and obviously the water it explodes, the ship deconnects, and the water starts venting out into space. Bum, bum, bum. We then cut to the chief checking out the now exploded, very empty tank in spacesuits in the very CGI room. And he's looking out at Boomer, who's in a Raptor, sort of assessing the damage from the outside. And they kind of have like a coded talk where like he's sort of giving the signal like, "Don't worry about it, I got you." While they're still sort of being listened into on the comms for everyone to hear. So it's kind of like a DL sort of signals to each other, sort of thing.
Yeah, like because Boomer says like, yeah, I'm glad it's you taking care of this, and then like crashed out, and the Raptor looks at her like, what the fuck was that? Because like again, they're actually pretty bad at this.
They really, really are. Yep.
Yeah. I'll tell you what moment I liked is I liked this moment where Tyrell says like, I've got eyes on you, because he's literally looking out the hole in the tank to see the Raptor shining a light in on them. And like, it was just kind of a neat moment, because it's like, yeah, you shouldn't have eyes on her, but that's the situation we're in now. You should not be able to see that thing.
Yep. One thing I was very curious about is like they clearly they're open to space, and yet they still have gravity, which is interesting to me. I didn't know. I don't know if the show ever explains how the artificial gravity on the Galactica works, but it was just something I was thinking about.
I mean, I don't think it's an issue, because like
theoretically they could have magnetic boots, but we never get like a good shot of that either.
I don't think that's even necessary, because if they've got airlocks to get them so if they've got like airlocks to get them into the tank, what?
I'm sorry, listeners. Vera, we probably had a cut there, but Vera had to take some water because she was coughing, and now her voice is just so squeaky, it just made me laugh. Anyways. Airlocks, if they have airlocks. Oh, I gotta click for that.
If they have airlocks to get into this thing, then like once the hole is made, initially there's decompression to expel all the air out. But once the air's out, whatever gravity is working on the rest of the ship should still be working in there.
That's what I'm saying. I agree with you. I don't think that that's a problem. It just made me sort of think overtly about it, of like, how are they like if the ship is open to space, how is the gravity still working? There is probably an explanation for it. You can make it work in a sci-fi way. It just made me think.
Yeah, especially considering we don't know how they have gravity in the first place.
Yes, I'm not saying there's not some bullshit explanation that you can make work for it. I'm just saying it made me think about wondering what that bullshit explanation was. So, I didn't say it broke. I mean, it breaks physics in a way that every sci-fi show breaks physics, except for like The Expanse, who did it. I
mean, yeah, it it breaks physics insofar as, you know, artificial gravity is not a thing.
Yes. Anyways, we then cut to basically a briefing where Gaeta's sort of informing the president, Ty, Adama, as well as like Lee, and I think Baltar's there as well, and a few other folks, Billy, about what happened. And he's basically saying the water supply that we have will last the Galactica 6 days, but 1/3 of the fleet will run out of water in 2 days. They sort of order captains to go on emergency rations. The president does. Ty thinks that there will be riots on those ships because civilians don't like to be told that they can't have water. And the president then pushes Gaeta to have a theory about what caused the accident. Gaeta initially tries to dodge it, and Adama sort of also backs him and says we prefer not to guess, but the president pushes, and Adama says, Gaeta, take a guess. And Gaeta says the tank, his assumption was that the tank was structurally weakened by the attacks earlier on in the show, and it caused it to buckle. And Adama orders that they analyze nearby star systems for water.
Yeah, and it's just me, like, it really seemed like Gaeta didn't believe that.
Yeah, I think it was, I think the intention was, and I don't think it works, considering we'll get an answer for it just a little bit later, but I think the intention was to be like Gaeta just sort of underplaying the problem within the military, like not wanting to say like, oh, we think it was an explosion, because that would mean he's the one saying it to the president when that's like a big deal that Adama should be putting forward and not him. So I think that was the intention with what was going on here as like a power thing, but it doesn't really play.
It could have been that, or it could have been just one of those things like, if you don't talk about it, it's not real. You know,
there's that too, yeah.
Which is a very human nature thing. And I think either one could have worked, but we don't.
It's not elaborated enough upon to.
We don't know Gaeta well enough as a character to be able to make a call on what it is that's going on.
Exactly. So yeah, that was my. I mean, both reads work, but yeah, it just doesn't come across. I think ultimately what does read, and I think the larger intention of it is to showcase how the president and Adama sort of have different ways of going about dealing with stuff. I think it's like the bigger deal.
Yeah, and like that part comes across insofar as like she would like your best guess, and Adama does not want to hear your guess.
Exactly. We then cut to Callie finding a piece of like burn-marked wreckage from the explosion and giving it to the chief. She says, "Oh, I think this has burn marks from an explosive," but Tyrell says it's tough to tell. It's too rusted out, clearly trying to cover for Boomer. But then we cut to Ty talking about that there are 5 planetary bodies nearby that might have water. So they'll check out them out with the Raptor. With raptors, I should say. And the president says, "How likely are we to find water?" And Ty says, "I guess you'll want me to guess now." Being a little bit rude, but then Adama sort of pushes him, and Ty apologizes, saying, it's been a long few days or whatever. I forget the exact sentence.
Yeah, he actually kind of has this look like, at least to me, that it wasn't just Adama being like, "Hey, jackass," but I think he kind of has a moment of realization of like, "Oh, right, I fucked up there."
Yeah, it's just more evidence of like Ty doesn't really have a filter, or at least not a good one.
No, he doesn't. Well, he's used to only having one person above him, and that person above him knows him well enough that he doesn't have to filter. And everybody below him just has to put up with whatever the fuck he says.
Yep. But he does say the galaxy is a pretty barren place, so the likelihood is pretty small. And then Baltar basically is asked to share his results of the need for food and water in the civilian population. I won't go through the numbers, but it's a lot. And Lee even says that's what we need per month. And Baltar's like, no, per week. So they just need a lot of food and water.
Yeah. And I like the layers of complications. And again, like this slightly more analog kind of technology, because it's like on something like Star Trek, it'd be like, well, scan the surrounding systems for water. And here it's like, okay, get a look at the systems to figure out what planets could possibly conceivably have water. And then we have to go send somebody out to check manually. And again, it's just more interesting. Like a lot of times, and this is something that I think sci-fi loses sight of, fantasy sometimes too, but sci-fi loses sight of, is that the limitations can usually make it more interesting. Some things you want to skip over because, the limitations are boring. But wouldn't they have the technology to do that? Yeah. But like, that's boring. Now they're just sitting in the command center scanning planet after planet like it's freaking Mass Effect 2. And you know what? That's boring. That's real boring.
There's an elegant balance, and it also depends on the story you're telling. Like stuff like The Expanse, or especially the books of The Expanse, but even the show as well, and things like Guy on the Moon, The Martian. The Martian, like they thrive on telling stories that are very much about the nitty gritty. Whereas something like Star Trek, the problem became in like Voyager, the answers all be solved by technobabble a lot of the time. It's like, yeah, we yada yada the yada yada, we techie tech the tech, and everything's solved now. But Star Trek works when you're being like, all right, we just use the tech as like a vehicle for like different types of stories. So it really just kind of depends, but they can be hindrances or they can be benefits depending on the type of story you're telling. So, but Galactica, I think, gets a lot of use out of really digging into the nitty gritty in a kind of a realistic for the setting kind of way. Artificial gravity aside.
just speaking personal preference, and like again, I do like Star Trek, but more often than not, I'm gonna find your setting more interesting the more restrictions you have on it, rather than like, they can do practically anything with their magic technology. I'm like, oh okay.
Oh, I agree completely. I love The Expanse, not only for that, but in large part because of that stuff. Like there's a thing in the book, I won't spoil who or when it happens, but there's like a whole thing in a book where like a major character dies, not because like they're in a shootout and they survive the shootout, but a main character dies because of the fact that while he was older, And while they were doing so many different things to try to get away from the shots that they were getting hit at, the gravity had to keep changing, and it gave them a heart attack. So, like, that sort of stuff is, like, really, really interesting to me. So I like that sort of stuff in science fiction. But again, I think it depends on the story you're telling. But yeah, I think as a general preference, I agree with you. It reminds me of there's a Stargate show. I love the Stargate shows, but there was a Stargate show that was trying to mimic Battlestar Galactica that everyone hated, and I loved it because the first like 6 episodes of the show was them stuck on this ship. The whole premise was it was Stargate Universe.
I was gonna say that was Universe, wasn't it?
It was Universe. I really liked Universe because like the first three episodes of the show were called Air, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, because it was just them needing to get air, and then the next 2 episodes after that were Water, Part 1, Part 2, and it was just them needing to be like, fuck, we need water. So the first 5 episodes are like dealing with we need air, we need water, and I actually found that to be really interesting. So, anyways, we then cut to Cylon occupied Caprica, where we see Hilo and
again, right off the bat, that caption, why? Like this is something that like we'll see if the show comes back to, but I'm just asking, why do they need to occupy the planet? Why would they?
Interesting question.
Because again, if their goal is to wipe everybody out, you know, to quote aliens, you know, just take off and nuke the thing from orbit. It's
blast the planet. Yeah.
Why are you on the ground? Why are you occupying the planet? I would like to know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Is all I will say. But yes, Hilo, and I'm going to call her Boomer 2, because revealing things about this character that I would call her otherwise has been a problem for me. So I'm just going to call her Boomer version 2. They basically find out that the... Yes.
Shit. Sorry.
Boomer 2, electric Cylon.
Well, no, my brain started smashing words together. It was like, oh, you can take 2 and Boomer and make it tumor, but then it's like then she's cancer.
Well, they do deal with anti-radiation meds, so yeah.
So we have Boomer and tumor.
Yes, I'll call her Tumor for lack of a better thing for until later. So Hilo and Tumor, they basically find Tumor's supposed raptor is sort of already captured by Cylons. We can pretty much presume that this was always intended, that this is another raptor. She didn't actually come back, but it's basically her cover story to Hilo of like, I came back for you.
It's staged. Yeah. And I think they were wise to skip over whatever actual explanation she gave to him. Like, she has obviously told him her cover story of coming back for him. And I think that's good, because I think trying to actually show the audience that scene, the audience is going to have a million questions like, well, this part doesn't match. Why isn't he noticing this? Why isn't he asking that? Like, she gave him the cover story. He bought it. That's all that matters.
Exactly.
So we skip it.
So yeah, basically we see the staged event. So we basically learn that Hilo's buying into this being Tumor. We then cut to the Chief giving a presentation to the leaders of the Galactica, as we had before. He's very clearly nervous. And again, I like this actor, how he plays it. Like, you can tell that he's nervous, but not in a way that's overt.
It's in a way that could be read like he's nervous because the president's there. He's nervous because, you know, a lot of people are really depending on the information, and he has to say that there's still a bomb missing. So, like, there's a lot of stuff in there that could account for the fact that he's visibly nervous delivering this. That wouldn't cause people to go, you hiding something from us, Chief?
Exactly. But he basically says, yes, the Master at Arms found the 6 C4 detonators missing. 1 is still unaccounted for. They've opened an investigation into who had access to the locker, but due to spotty record keeping from the attack, they may never know. Then Adama sends everyone out of the room except for Baltar, Lee, Ty, Adama, and the president. And then Adama sort of says there is at least 1 Cylon on board Galactica. So now
Commercial break.
Come back. We basically learn that, like, there's the 5 people in this room and only 3 Marines who know who the Cylons are. Who the Cylons are. That there are Cylons that look like humans for certain. There are rumors spreading about, but those are the only people that know that for a fact. And then they start asking Baltar about his screening the Galactica crew. And then we go back to Baltar's Mind Palace. So we get some cuts here where we have Head 6 basically asking Baltar, do you remember the first time you lied to a woman? And she says, yes, yeah, you show me mine, I'll show you. I told a girl in his class, like, you show me yours, I'll show you mine, and he did not. And I just wrote, ass, you always reciprocate, douche nozzle. Yeah.
And then pointing out, I think I slept with her later.
Yeah,
Later
she
on,
did turn out to be a beautiful woman. Yeah.
God, you're gross, dude.
He's a very disgusting dude. I do really like, though, the juxtaposition of how confident he is in his mind palace versus like how nervous he gets when he's like trying to lie to the president about like, oh yeah, I definitely have the screening, but there's significant problems. I need more chemical compounds, and also it's a volatile compound, and like maybe I have to tell you, but maybe I do. Like he just keeps stumbling over everything.
I am so happy that this is biting him in the ass so hard.
You called it. You did call it way back in the miniseries. So.
Yeah, like it wasn't that hard to call. I'm like, okay, you're solving your immediate problem of getting rid of this guy and having somebody, take the fall for you. But you're claiming to have done that by claiming to have something you don't have. And what I really love about this, and this was something I kind of alluded to earlier that I was going to bring up about this guy. Mm-hmm. He's not actually that smart. Mm-hmm. Like
we talked about this a little bit with Dr. Aaron.
Yeah, he's really not. But that's not actually any kind of problem or plot hole for something that's about to happen. But part of what I'm noting about this is like, if he stopped and thought for 2 seconds, he would already be working on coming up with a real screening test, because he would have realized they're going to fucking follow up on that. They're not going to let me get away with that. But he clearly hasn't been. He was like, well, there's the immediate problem solved.
No long-term thinking.
Everything's fine. Like, you idiot.
I will, and it also works too by the mitigating factor like of last episode where like they didn't get a lot of sleep for a long time. So like you could be like, he is an idiot, and also there's some external factors that would also distract him from really thinking about it too.
Like there is like, here's the thing. It may not.
And
be
I think
his
they
fault.
work together. Yeah.
Yeah. It may not be fully his own fault that he hasn't made like any progress on making an actual screening, but the fact that he appears to be blindsided by getting the question at all, that one's on him. He should have known that question was coming, and he doesn't. Yes.
Well, I think it's a little, it's like he's an idiot, and also like I mean, it goes back to what we were saying with Dr. Aaron, and what I'm really liking on this go round of watching the show, because when I first watched this show, I do remember thinking like, Baltar's actually pretty smart, and now I'm watching like, nah, he's just a mediocre asshole dude who really doesn't know shit. Like might know science a little bit better, but he got by because he's a dude who can charm and it has a certain level of sleaze. So.
Yep. Well, there's something that's about to happen that's like the main thing that I'm going to be latching on to. So go ahead, keep going.
Oh, I think I know exactly what you're going to be talking about. But yes, basically, Adama kind of cuts through the bullshit and says, look, I get it. Like, your intellect outstrips all of us. What you're saying, to get large-scale screening, you need staffing, resources. And Baltar's like, exactly. Well, maybe not more staff. But then, because Head 6 points out, like, someone's snooping around. But then Gata gets assigned to him. So he basically now he has to make a Cylon detector without people realizing he never had one to begin with.
So Adama going like, your brilliance outstrips everyone's here. Like the presumption, the assumption of brilliance, which I have no doubt is a big part of how Baltar has gotten where he's gotten in the first place. Like he probably knows just enough about some things, and then is able to layer enough charm and bullshit on top of that for people just to go, oh, well, he just knows everything, doesn't he? No, he fucking doesn't. But I like that they are kind of establishing that everybody else is taking his supposed brilliance as read. Like, oh yeah, of course he is. Which, like, it just makes me think of fucking Musk, like, 8 years ago. People were like,
if you were going to bring the parallel, he is very Musk-like.
Yeah. Because like it was just all this stuff of like, but he's a genius and he's an inventor. It's like, no, he's not. He's a rich, like, if you still think any good things about that man, why are you listening to us? But like at this point,
no.
What?
Sorry. No, nothing. Keep going. I will save it for spoiler minute. Anyways.
Oh, boy.
I just had a real bad realization. Anyways.
Anyway.
How deep this parallel is going to go. Anyways.
Oh, God damn it. Does he become president eventually?
I'm not
and then
saying
we got President
anything.
Musk?
Not saying shit. Not saying shit.
But anyway, like, the point being, at this point in time, we all now know Elon Musk is a fucking idiot.
Mm-hmm.
He's just rich enough that he's never had to face consequences. And because he was so rich, everyone just assumed, well, he must be brilliant. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so rich. But no, one does not follow the other.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And we are
the same assumptions being made about Baltar.
And we get the same thing in the miniseries. We kind of got hints of this in the miniseries where it was very clear that Capra 6, she was the Capra 6 at the time. Like, anyways, Head 6, who was the... How do I explain? The 6 that he was with on Caprica, whether or not it is the same one in his head or not, the one he was with on Caprica was clearly doing a lot of the heavy lifting for his programming, and he was willing to take full credit for it. It's why also she was able to get in there and reprogram it for the Cylon's needs, but it's also very clear he was using her to be able to, because she actually was competent, and he was very happy to just take credit for a work that a woman did. So that inherent sort of patriarchy in there as well. So, yep, not a good guy. And yeah, very Musk-like. But anyways, we cut to Boomer Lee talking to Boomer, and he sort of says, like, hey, you need to find water. Good hunting out there. She's heading out with Crashdown to look for water. Boomer also goes and talks to the chief, and she's talking to him as like, he's saying focus on the mission. No one has a connection to you. No reason to believe that. And she basically pushes, I know I wouldn't, but I need you to believe that. It's important to me that you believe that. And he says, yes, sir, basically, and like plays it off as like he's saluting her, but like showing he's confident in her. This is kind of what I was hinting at before, and kind of what I kind of believe is going on, sort of my read on just this episode alone. Even though she is like in non-sleeper agent mode in these moments, I think the very much intention, even by the sleeper version agent side of her, is to be like, she's doing this so she can manipulate Tyrell into being too deep in that even he will then be on her side. You know what I mean? Like, he's like now pot invested in emotionally into helping her and trying to manipulate her into being just going along with this, and to the point of like he's just missing all of the red flags because he's looking at just her emotion.
Yeah, and this part I get. It's actually stuff that happens with her later that had me the most confused.
Yeah, and there is that stuff that we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, I think like this stuff is like very clearly, whether it's her intention, like it's an earnest, it seems like this version of her, however we're going to quantify it, earnestly wants him to believe her. But also it is a manipulation tactic to get someone on her side who basically turn him, essentially.
Yeah.
So we then cut to the president and Adama, where the president is visiting Adama's room for a minute. And she says, and she sees in his office, like, he has a ton of books. And, she says, I would love to borrow a book or two. I only brought one with me when I came to the Galactica. And he asked what it was. He says, Murder on Pycon. I have a weakness for, like murder mysteries, essentially. So it sounds like she was reading like just a plain old, like, Stephen King-esque murder mystery kind of thing. And he says...
yes, Stephen King, known so well for his murder mysteries.
You know what I mean? Kind of like the airport book. She's reading the airport book is what she was reading.
I know what you mean. I'm still going to make fun of you.
Screw you. Anyways, don't give me a point for that. Adama recommends Dark Day, which is a book that we hear is like a classic. She says, I haven't read the classics, and he gives it to her. And she says, thank you. It may take me a while to get back to you. And he says, it's a gift. I never lend books. And she says, thank you for the gift. So this is a scene for me that's like showcasing like, oh, they actually do have a lot more in common with each other.
Yeah. So. And again, it's this sort of, it's showing that they also, while they're not on the same page with everything, they are also each willing to try and get a better understanding of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, is just going to lead to, I presume, better and juicier conflict.
We'll see. But yeah, it does also show like I think the president also being kind of impressed by how well read Adama is too is another thing. I don't think she expected a military guy to be so well read, so which is kind of an interesting note as well. Let's see.
And again, that highlight of the scarcity, like because she said she only brought like 2 books, and there aren't that many books left now.
Well, we then have Baltar walking with Gaeta in the hallway, and Gaeta's very, very excited. He's like, oh, I actually study this stuff and, that sort of thing. And Baltar's like very clearly trying to get out of talking to Gaeta, and he sees that there is essentially a poker game going on, even though it's a weird made-up sci-fi card game. But essentially it's poker, and he goes in
thematically, it is a poker game.
Yes, and he goes in and plays poker against Starbuck. And I also like this in lieu of betting cash because he doesn't have. There's no money that he has on him. He bets his clothing, saying it's fine Caprica silk or whatever the hell it is. And so he basically sort of says does it to get Gaeta out of his hair and focus on the card game.
Yeah.
So, we then cut to. That's one of my favorite scenes of the episode where the president and Adama are talking again in Adama's office. And the president basically says, there's some riots going on and we need a show of power. And Adama says, I'm not going to be your policeman. And his quote, which is one I wrote down, there's a reason why you separate military and the police. One fights the enemy of the state, the other serves and protects the people. When the military becomes both, then the enemy of the state tends to become the people. Which is a very good quote. I mean, we talk about ACAB as well, but...
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you and I obviously come at this from the perspective of not being big fans of the military or the police. That being said, if we're talking about the philosophy of what each one is supposed to be, this is a really good perspective that he has. Like, if you deal with the reality of policing, they do tend to look at people as their enemies,
especially as they become more militarized with a lot of like cops in the United States getting more militarized.
But that's dealing with like the real world, how things play out. He's dealing with it more on the philosophical purity of what these things are supposed to be. And I can appreciate that because it doesn't even necessarily read as naive from him. It's like he's trying to cling to what structures are still in place. And he's laying out a specific reason why him and his people stepping into a role they are not meant for could make things worse. And just as a perspective, again, talking strictly about the philosophy of what police and military are meant to be, I agree with that from a philosophical standpoint. As a practical standpoint, falls apart very quick. But as a philosophical one, yeah, I agree with that.
And the president says, I won't let that happen. And Adama agrees to say I'll send troops to the ship. And then she reiterates, Commander, I won't let that happen. So it's sort of like clearly being like, it's like her trying to set aside, like, I have authority in this, but obviously you can tell that this is a very good groundwork for drama.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, this was real good stuff.
It was honestly one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode. We then cut to Boomer and Crashdown looking for water on the rock. Crashdown reveals that he's a weird sexist racist because he wants to, like, he's like, oh, I remember this girl Kimiko that I want to name it after or whatever. It's weird shit like that. Crashdown's just a weird dude.
I'm not sure I'd call it racist. It is like this weird kind of patronizing moment where it sounds like he's reminiscing about like probably a girl that he either didn't get to bang or banged once or whatever.
Yeah.
There is that. I wouldn't call it racist. I think it just happened to have a
very Asian sounding name, which is weird to me too, because it's like the way that race maps onto fictional sci-fi stuff. We don't analyze it enough in this show.
I mean, like I am trying to make a point of not reading into the naming conventions too much, since I don't understand how this relates to our Earth delineation of what names mean for nationalities and everything else.
I would agree. I think for me, the way I say racist is like, yes, within the reality of the show, it is just a name that could have many different connotations. However, it is a writer picked that name that is a name that is often associated with like Asian folks when Asian women and sex work is its own whole conversation. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's kind of dipping its toe into that.
I get what you're saying. It's not a character problem, it's a writing problem.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Though I don't think it's wrong if he was a weird sexist racist based on the vibe of him.
Yeah, but then a bit like Garibaldi in Babylon 5, I don't think the show realizes that.
Yes, agreed. Anyways, well, we do, while this is all going on, we do see that there is the final C4 bomb underneath Boomer's chair, of which she, at least at this point, seems to be unaware of. We then cut back to Baltar at the poker table. He and Starbuck basically have a back and forth where Starbuck seems very confident, thinks she's going to win. And kind of like there's a power play in terms of like them going off of each other. It's like, oh, I would be embarrassed if I walked away from this. And she's like, no, it would be humiliated, I think would be the better word, you know, or something like that. But he ultimately does win the hand, much to Starbuck's surprise and clearly chagrin. And he says, you know, without a little risk, life would be so dull, he says as he calls. He thanks her for a pleasant evening, and he gives Starbuck one of the last cigarettes left in the universe, and she blows it in his face. But it's not like a rude way. It's more like, this guy sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's doing the thing. We're taking a game that is nearly 50% chance and treating it like it's a game of skill that a smart person would win at. Because, like, we know Starbuck's good at this game. We have watched her clean up repeatedly at this game. And we haven't established Baltar as a card shark, so regardless of whether or not he has a basis to know this game, it is being treated in that very cliche way of, oh yes, of course the smart guy just comes in and dominates this game.
I actually have a slightly different read on the intention of this. My read on this is not to be that he is smarter, but also for most of this show, outside of his mind palace so far, he has been kind of like on the back foot. And I think this scene kind of gets across like that he is suave. Like, he may not be smart, but there's a reason that he's able to talk himself into certain rooms. And like, you watch this and you're like, I understand why he can get it. Like, why he can get the ladies, you know? And I think the intention is here, like, not to show him being smart, but like, I think the way the play goes down is not showing how smart he is at being a card shark, but how well he is able to play people, especially when it's another woman. When it's a woman,
yeah, except
a heterosexual woman, I should say.
I get that as an intent. It doesn't work for me though, because I don't buy Starbuck getting charmed by him. So I don't buy his approach working on this woman as I understand her.
Well, I don't think she's charmed. I mean,
But okay,
again,
like,
maybe the read of the scene. Sorry, go.
So, like, I love poker and I love poker scenes, but it's why I'm super nitpicky about them. Mm-hmm. When you play poker, you are doing one of two things. You are running the odds in your head, and you are playing the other players more than you are playing your cards. I don't buy him being good enough at reading other people. Like, yes, he is charming, but I don't see his charm working on her in a way that means he can play her. And like, ultimately, he wins because he just happens to have a better hand, which might not bug me, except that like there's applause in the room because he has a better hand, which that ticks me off. I'm like, it's not skill to draw a good hand.
Yeah, I agree. The applause go too far. That I agree on. I think like it's not a skill-based thing here at all. I think he's playing it up because he knows he has the better hand. Regardless, there's no skill involved in him getting the hand. He just knows he has it, and he's playing with her for fun.
I know, but what I'm saying is the way that he is playing it, I don't buy her falling for. That's what feels wrong with how skilled she is at this game. His technique to mess with her at least to my eye, is so clumsy that it makes her look worse that she fell for it.
Potentially. I don't know. I think I could see what you're saying. For me, I think Starbuck comes across as someone who like is comfortable with the people that she's comfortable with and very bad at reading the people that she does not cognitate into her immediate worldview.
I could buy that.
Like, she knows how to play the dudes in the room. She does not know how to play Baltar necessarily.
I could buy that. The reason I'm not going to get there on my own yet is we are second episode into the series proper, and I don't know her well enough to.
Yes,
that's
I know her a bit better than.
Yes, that's the thing. That's the kind of reading you can have when you like really get to know a character, and I don't yet.
Yeah, I think she's a character who is kind of like, she knows how to hang out with the bros. Like, we've kind of already seen that. Like, she knows how to hang out with her other fellow pilots. And yet beyond that, it's kind of like she has zero skill and charisma. So, anyways, we then cut to Dee on the bridge saying that the rappers that have come in have reported negative for water. There's only Boomer and Crashdown are the only ones left. And if they don't come back and find water, they have to jump to another area and find a needle in a haystack, or as Adama puts it, a grain of salt on a beach. So,
yep.
Stakes are high is what I'm saying. We then
no pressure.
We cut to Crashdown and Boomer and scanning for water. Crashdown finds nothing, but Boomer says that she doesn't see anything, but we see on her screen that she does, in fact, have water on her screen. She is detecting water, but she seems to be kind of out of it and not entirely sure. And then she says, I have this feeling, let's run that sweep again. And this time she does see the water, but she says she's having trouble saying it. And she starts reaching for the C4 in the seat next to her, sort of unconsciously. But then she sort of fights this, and then she breaks whatever spell she's under, and she says they do have positive contact for water.
So this is the scene that really just left me going like, what the fuck is going on? Mm-hmm. So, and again, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, but I am lacking the knowledge to parse this. So here's where I'm kind of like running up the walls. It seems like bad planning and bad technique for your sleeper agent to be able to override subliminal messages if that's how you are controlling them. Because that's what she appears to do. Mm-hmm. And more to the point, if that's not what's actually going on, then what the fuck? Then what the fuck is any of this? That's the only thing that makes sense, but that to me kind of reveals a potentially massive hole in, not a plot hole, but just like a tactical hole in what the Cylons are even doing. If these people can be so deep in cover that they are actively fighting their own programming. Not uninteresting, tactically big fucking risk. Which makes me also wonder if the Cylons even know that she can do this. Mm-hmm. Which is the other thing. Like, I suppose it's slightly more plausible that, like, they don't... If they haven't had reason to give... Because if the sleeper agents up to this point have just been getting planted places... and haven't really had to do anything that is in direct contradiction to who their cover story is... then they might not have had cause to actually fight against their programming. So this may be a fully untested area as far as the Cylons are aware. They might not even know that she's fighting it. But if they do know, then it's like, boy, that's a calculated fucking risk that you have using these people at all. And it's interesting to me that you said unconsciously reaching for the bomb, because like I really could not get a read at all. And it was, again, one of the things that frustrated me as to how many, if any, of the times her hand went towards that bomb she was aware of or not.
The way I read that, so I'm not going to comment on the rest of the stuff that you said because I have answers to that, or I don't, and I won't say. So I'll leave that hanging. The one thing I will say about that part of it is the way that I read it within the episode is she goes and reaches for the bomb. She's not looking at her hand, and it seems like it's unconscious because later on when they come back to the Galactica and she lands, she looks down and seems actively surprised by there being the C4 there. So I read it.
That wasn't my read on her reaction. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Oh, I read it 100% as a surprise.
But I didn't have that as a clean read. That to me just read as more of a fuck, what do I do with this thing and how do I get rid of it? Not, oh shit, I didn't know it was there.
Oh,
at least At least that was my read. I could be wrong. I'm frequently wrong.
I mean, yeah, I think it's fine to read it that way. I think very much the intention is to read it as she was actively shocked that it was there, and that was the first moment where when they had come back to the ship, she was landing. They were telling everyone that they have water, which is the next scene. She looks down and sees it, and it's like she's seeing it for the first time, even though she was reaching for it earlier. I think that's the intention.
Okay. I didn't get that as cleanly as I would have liked to.
Fair enough. But yeah, I think that was what they intended it to be. But yes, we do have them go back. Crashdown tells everyone that they have water, break out the swim trunks. Everyone's celebrating. Adama tells the entire fleet that they found water, probably to calm down the riots. And he said, let's go have a drink. Back on Cylon occupied Caprica, though, we have Tumor and Hilo taking anti-rad meds. Not really mom's home cooking as they sort of make food from the fire and twigs and moss and stuff that they have. Or they say they'll have to have meals of twigs and moss by the end of the week, I should say. Yeah. Hilo asks, why did you come back to me? She sort of plays it off as a joke. I hate to fly alone. And he pushes and says, I couldn't leave you behind. Let's leave it at that. But then at that moment, they have a colonial fleet signal that they hear, and they learn that someone in the military is alive and kicking on Caprica. They get excited and hug, and there is clear some sort of romantic or sexual tension between them.
Take a wild guess what my note was.
Uh-huh. You didn't like it?
My exact words were, oh, come on!
Uh-huh. Well, I will at least give it that there's potentially a intention to create that tension on Tumor's part.
Yeah, I get the impression that Tumor is fully aware, whereas Boomer is not. Now, I can't quantify that, but that is the impression I have, is that because Tumor basically only has to deal with Hilo, then she only basically has to perform for one person. Whereas I think it makes a lot more sense to have the sleeper agents when they're surrounded by people and they don't have to worry about keeping their story straight with all these people. They just no, they'll just be what we've programmed them to be. Whereas if she gets to narrow down and just focus on this one person, okay, then that's something that she could probably do without having to be full sleeper mode. That having been said, something just occurred to me. So the way that Caprica 6 described what was going to happen when the bombs went off and she presumably died was that at that point her memories would be uploaded to a new body. Now, I've kind of already touched on this insofar as I have questions about whether, is there a shared cloud that they're all part of? Does one get put into a body and then it maintains its own thing? If a bunch of them die, do all their memories get put into one new body, and so on and so forth? I now have another question along those same lines. When did Boomer upload her memories? Because while Boomer may have a fully fake and implanted backstory, Boomer's relationship with Hilo is something that had to have been developed during her time as a sleeper agent. Which means that while previously it was sort of laid out, when we die, our memories and minds get uploaded somewhere else. Okay, obviously dying is not a requirement. You have to be able to do it in other circumstances. Otherwise, Tumor could not possibly know how to even interact with this guy.
So basically you're asking is do they have one continuance of identity, or do they split at any point? And what does that mean?
Are these independently thinking things, or are they all drawing simultaneously from some kind of Boomer cloud of data?
Well, I mean, there's multiple ways. I'm not going to answer that question. But there's multiple ways you could do it.
One positive. There are many ways, but I'm just catching.
There's one Boomer cloud. They all are individuals, but they can double themselves. In which case, one version becomes there's two of the same version, and then they split off. One's lying. They just tell him how to act. They all have a similar personality. There's a billion different answers to that question. All I will say is it's a good question to ask.
Okay.
Is something I'll be saying a lot, I'm sure. We then cut to Boomer coming down on the Galactica, and as everyone's celebrating, Boomer sort of whispers to the chief to have him go look at the C4, and he finds it. And he's sort of like,
oh god, it's so awkward because she's like, there's something with the ship. I need you to check. And like the chief doesn't even catch it right off. He's like, oh, I'll have Callie do it. And she's like, no, I need you to do it.
Yep.
Like, boy, you two suck at this.
They really do.
You're really bad conspirators.
Mm-hmm. But then we cut to Roslin talking to Lee, and he's she's asking him about the Olympic carrier, sort of saying, like, I know you were probably thinking about it and you're dealing a lot about it. And Paulo says, he kind of repeats what his dad said to him: a man accepts responsibility and lives with it. But then Roslin sort of presents this other idea of President Adar, when he sent the Marines. She explains this scenario that President Adar had where he sent the Marines in to take down some civilians. And he said he knew it was a mistake afterwards, and he kept names in his desk drawer. And he would always say it was imperative for a leader to learn from his mistakes, even if he can't admit them publicly. And she reveals, like, I don't have a desk drawer, but I do try to hold on to my mistakes. And she reveals that she has the word Olympic carrier sort of written on a note in her pocket. And so she sort of is carrying it. And she's sort of saying, like, I don't necessarily know if this was a mistake or not, but it's something that, I want to carry, as something to think about, essentially.
Yeah. So... like I said, I don't think this is actually like in direct contradiction.
No, I don't think it is either. Yeah.
To Adama's ideas that like once you've made the decision, you have to live with it. But it is a nice additive to that idea because I'm not saying this is the case with Adama, but it is potential that adopting that notion of once I've made the decision, I just have to live with it, makes you not reflect on what it is you've done. You just do a thing and move on and don't appreciate the gravity of what it was that you did. And now, again, I'm not saying that is the kind of a person Adama is, but it is the kind of person that can result from that philosophy. So I kind of like this as an additive to be like, okay, but if you think you might have screwed up, don't just let that go. Hold on to that. And
keep it in mind for the next decision.
Yeah, because if you just like, well, I made that decision to move forward. If it was a mistake, well, you're probably going to keep making more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like it. And what I also like about it is it kind of showcases three different things. Because we talked about, like, initially at first glance, you could say, like, oh, she's saying the same thing that Apollo was saying at the beginning of the episode to his dad. Like, oh, she's just reflecting what he was saying back at him. But actually, as you pointed out, like, Apollo's sort of thing was like, I wish I could go back and change it, or like, what do I, like, this sort of questioning of like, could I do it again, sort of thing, the sort of youth perspective on it. Whereas this way, both Roslin and Adama are giving different advice, but kind of ones that can work in conjunction together. It's like, you take responsibility for it, but you should also carry it and be thinking about it. And as a result, like, it sort of pushes Lee into a sort of like a growing up sort of thing. Like, these two are being different mentors to him. Yeah. Now, will their ideology come into conflict in some way in Lee? Who knows?
Of course not. Why would you embody a conflict in a character?
No.
Good writers don't do that. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. If you have a core conflict or a core point of view, it is often helpful to embody it in a character.
Mm-hmm. And also, I didn't say it earlier too. I should point out as well that, like, that earlier scene between Lee and Adama kind of points to something we were talking about with Dr. Aaron last episode, which is like, Lee seems to be mostly over his shit with his dad. Like, there's still probably some lingering baggage that may or may not come up, but overall seems to be like on a decently good terms with his dad.
Yeah, they seem to be settling in, which is good. Is good. Like, it's not like I don't ever want them to clash again. I just don't want them clashing over the same stuff all the goddamn time.
Then Roslin, back in this scene, basically says, I asked Lee to be her military advisor. And he says, whoa, I think Adama should be doing that. I don't want to go around his back. And she's like, nope, not going behind his back. I don't need military advice. I need advice about the military. Your sort of advice about your dad made me reassess the man. And it won't interfere with your duties at the CAG, which then Adama or Lee says it's pronounced CAG. And she says, see, there you go. Don't you understand why I need you? And that your first assignment is to tell your father.
I really like the distinction she makes. Like, I don't need military advice. I need advice about the military, which that's a great perspective because, like, she needs to better understand how they think and how they operate because, to be blunt about it, Adama's not going to explain it to her. He's too damn busy just doing the job. Mm-hmm. And Ty's an ass. Mm-hmm. So, like, Lee probably has the best, like, closest to a bird's eye view on the whole thing and knowing how it runs and operates that can, you know, be sure, basically serve as a translator. Mm-hmm. Like, here's what's going to happen if we do this. Here's what they're doing. Here's what it means to you.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, it's smart on her part and very important as a job. So,
yeah.
We end the episode off with Chief and Boomer kissing in a closet again. He tells her that he gave the detonator to the Master at Arms, and she gets initially kind of pushed against this, but he says, no, it'll put them on the same trail, but there'll be no suspicion on you, is essentially what he did.
Unless, of course, the Master at Arms is good at his job, in which case, it absolutely will lead him to suspect her. We'll find out, I guess.
Yes, but Boomer leaves, and as she walks out, we get an ambiguous look on her face of whether or not she is hardened or is worried.
Well, yeah, so. You walk down the hall, half shadowed.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the idea of, like, was all of this manipulation of Chief or not, and, like, to what level is she conscious of it or not?
I mean, like
I know, like, there's a version of her that is earnest in these things, but, like, yeah, what part of that is also being manipulated by sleeper agent side?
Yes, this is one of those things where, like, it's working at present how much they are walking the middle line. It's not going to work forever because eventually I need to understand why she does what she does and does it the way she does it. And more specifically, I'm going to need it, not right away, but eventually, especially if she remains undiscovered, I'm going to need, assuming that she is flipping in and out of sleeper mode, which again, I have to assume is the case, is the only thing that makes any degree of sense. But again, it just begs the question, like, is there something on the outside that is switching her on and off? Is it internal programming that just takes over of its own accord? Like, I'm eventually going to need to have a better sense of how the hell this works.
Yep. Well, we will see if that occurs. But speaking of which, since we've hit the end of the episode, it's time for Spoiler Minute. So for the next 60 seconds, if you do not want spoilers, just as Vera does not want spoilers, you can skip ahead 60 seconds because I'm going to talk about a hell of a lot of spoilers here. Vera is going to give me 60 seconds on the clock, take off her headphones so she can't hear anything, and we are good to go.
And go.
All right. So big thing. Yes, dear God, I forgot how much this man is like Elon Musk, Baltar, because he does become indeed president, which, yeah, very, very similar. Also forms his own cult. So, God, just Elon Musk all the way down. Yeah, I mean, the other big thing is Boomer. I'm trying very hard not to say Boomer / Athena for the two different ones, so I guess we'll call I think it's Tumor's Athena. Eventually gets the name Athena down the line. It is interesting to sort of see the two different trajectories these two Boomers will have in the show, one becoming more antagonistic and one becoming more friendly. If I recall, it is Tumor, aka Athena, that is more friendly. I might be mixing them up. Remind me if I am, but don't spoil Vera if you're going to write in the comments about that. But it is just interesting to sort of re-watch this show and get a better sense for their trajectory as the two different Boomers in the show. Also, we have the stuff with like uploading and things like that. I can't wait till we get to the Resurrection Ship episode because that's just a fascinating piece of lore and one of my favorite bits about how the Cylons work.
Time!
So we'll get there when we get there. Alrighty, Vera, what did you think of the episode?
I know I have my nitpicks, but it's still good. It is still good. Understand, and I really hope that listeners will take this in the spirit in which it is meant and not think I'm a nitpicky asshat. You need to realize I am watching this for the first time, and I have been let down by enough things that made it seem like they had a plan, and they didn't.
But they say at the top of the episode, Vera, they have a plan.
I know a lot of people tend to cite Lost for that because I stopped after the first season. I cite Orphan Black. I am going to come in always a bit hyper-vigilant and a bit nitpicky on anything that is presenting itself as like, oh yeah, the show narrative, we know exactly what we're doing. I'm like, I hope so. So don't think I'm trying to tear this down. And also understand that I'm coming at this from the perspective of not only a writer myself, but someone who has been basically recruited by multiple people, including this bitch, to basically look over their work and do this exact thing and poke all the holes I can find so that they can then be plugged up. So this is kind of what I do, and I do it out of love.
Yeah, I'll say I'll react to you, and then I'll give my own thoughts. It is interesting watching this because there are things here that I remember watching the show, and the last time I watched it, I think was like over 10 years ago, around 10 years ago when I was in college, because I rewatched it then. I remember really loving the show, and while I remember also having a few things I didn't like, I remember loving overall a lot of its, where it goes with a lot of its mysteries, is what I will say. However, I know there are some things that I know for sure that are like, I know that that's good, and I remember it being good, and I know it's good, and I know it's generally considered good. You may have a different opinion, Vera, as we go through, but like, I generally think the overall consensus is like, this is handled well. There are other things that are more controversial and controversially handled as the series goes along that I remember liking, but I know is controversial to say the least within the reaction to the show. So I'm honestly just enjoying and finding it curious to watch your reaction to this, to see how you are ultimately going to assess how these different things fall down, whether the things that people think are generally good you will hate, or if you'll agree, or if you'll like the controversial stuff that I like or not, if I'll change my opinion. It's just interesting to watch it on all of those fronts, and watching. It's just very interesting to see your, even more so than Babylon 5. With Babylon 5, I had some of that stuff, but this show is even more reliant on a lot of that stuff than Babylon 5 was, and I think it's just fascinating to kind of see it develop in from your perspective. So I'll say that. From my point of view, I really like this episode as well. I think it's not as solid and tense as the premiere episode was, but it is also doing a lot of really good things. The character work is still impeccable. I still really love the Adama, Laura, Roslin stuff. I think that's some of the strongest stuff of the series.
This is much more of a character building episode than like telling a tense story, which the previous one was.
Yes, this is more world building and setting up stuff and really building out where we're at in this world in a day-to-day life. I really like it, but yeah, it's certainly like a much more connective tissue episode to a degree. All right, if I recall, next week's episode is one of my personal favorites, so I'm excited for that. If I recall if it's the correct one. We'll see if it is when we get there, but if I recall if it's the one I think it is.
I'll be sure to hate it.
Yes, but again, it's one that I remember being very political, so we'll see if the it's one of those shows where like, I remember loving it as a kid. I remember it being a very political episode in terms of what it's doing, what it's saying. But my politics have certainly evolved since when I was in college, so we'll see if that still lands. I'm curious. Anyways, beyond that, anything else, Vera?
I was just thinking, I was about to say, I hope your politics have evolved since college. But then I remembered the fact that I had a sociology professor who called me the Marxist. So I'm not sure how much my politics have evolved.
I've just gotten more radical. Let me put it this way. When I was in high school, we had a social studies class. We had two different classes. And what they would do each year is they would have us be one class be the Republican team, one class be the Democrat team, and we'd have like a fake election in the school and whatever. I went to a small farming school, and I'm not saying everyone was Republican, but a lot of people were Republicans. And I was certainly the most Democrat-esque kid there, to the point where I was real worried I'd be put in the Republican class. And my teacher's like, I'm not gonna make you do that. So literally I turned one whole class Democrat just by nature of being me. They specifically was like, your class is going to be Democrats for you. So I was always on that side of things. I've just become more radical in my belief and more questioning of certain assumptions that even neoliberal Democrats will make. So yeah.
Radical, dude.
Anyways, anything else, Vera?
Nah.
All right, before we get to stuff, I will just say this, as I kind of hinted at earlier. I am going to be trying, we'll see how well I get along with this, but I will be trying to be reading more comments before the episode, before we record our next episode. Usually we're about 2 ahead of folks. Right now we're 1, but usually we're about 2.
If we stick to the plan we're supposed to do, we're going to record tomorrow.
Yes. We'll be back to that, but I'm just saying for this one, we were just 1 ahead, but we will be caught up of 2 ahead from here on out. That being said, if you do comment on the podcast on YouTube, where Vera's posting over on her Break Room of the Geeks channel, I will try and read those as soon as the podcast goes up during the day that goes up. So if you comment the day an episode goes up, there's a good chance I will probably read one of your comments at some point. So if not, just to encourage y'all to go out there and comment and share the YouTube version of the podcast.
Call to action, engagement.
Mm-hmm. Do it, engage.
Like, share, and subscribe.
But beyond that, that is everything I had. So Vera, stuff time.
Stuff. You can find my stuff by looking for Council of Geeks. Patreon pays the bills. Council of Geeks YouTube is the main thing that funds new videos every Saturday. Break Room of Geeks secondary channel, where yes, the YouTube versions of this very podcast go up, and you can leave your comments there about it, as well as videos on whatever I have watched, read, listened to, or played lately. You can also find Council of Geeks content on Blue Sky. I was going to say Twitch, but actually I think I'm going to be sundowning the Twitch channel, and I will still be streaming Wednesdays and Fridays, but I think I'm going to move it to the Break Room of Geeks, because honestly, Twitch has not grown for me in 2 years, and it's a piddly little thing.
Twitch itself seems to be just going through a fuck ton of bullshit anyways. So.
Well, I mean, and then there's the kicker that it's owned by Amazon. Of course, YouTube's owned by Google, but like I'm stuck with them. I don't have to be on a platform supported by Amazon. So if I could support one less massive evil corporation than I currently am, I'm down for that. That is the geeky stuff. There is, of course, also the spicy stuff.
Spicy stuff.
And for that, you can look for Vera Wild. Wild spelled WYLDE, and you will find increasingly spicy content on YouTube, Instagram.
And you can find me at Jesse Gender on YouTube. That's where my video essay style stuff is. I just recently, as of this recording, put out a video about the stories that white supremacy tells. So check that out. I have a follow-up video that'll be coming out in a week after this goes up, I believe, or will be up on my Patreon. That is a sister video to that one about stories that resist and push back against white supremacy and tell new versions of stories that we need today. So check out that video. I'm very proud of it. I have a secondary channel called Jesse Jenner After Dark, where I do news, reviews, reactions. I'm currently reviewing Daredevil Born Again. I'm also going to be reviewing Star Wars Andor when that comes out. I'm going to have to figure out how to do that, because, dear God, 3 episodes a week of that is going to be a pain in the ass. Fuck Disney for doing that. I get it to a degree, but it pisses me off also, because I wanted to enjoy that episode, that series, and not try to have to rush it down. Anyways, I'll figure it out. But I will be reviewing that when it goes up. And there's another show too that's coming that I wanted to review. Oh, Doctor Who. Duh. Doctor Who is actually coming up in the near future. So check out all that over there. I am also on Nebula, the streaming service that houses my movie Identities, which you can also check out that sci-fi film there, as well as some other projects that I may or may not be working on with them that I'm allowed to hint at now, according to them in a meeting I was in. So be on the lookout for other things from me there. What else? Patreon pays the bills. That's where I get videos early to people, extra videos, things like that. It also supports me paying my rent, if you like me being able to do that. And I am on Blue Sky, which is really pretty much the only social media that I use. So check me out there. Anything else, Vera?
Nah.
All right. With all that said, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.
Be seeing you.